So hello and welcome everybody. My name is Katharina Stechl. I'm the program manager for the Roundtable Human Rights in Tourism, and I'm delighted to serve as your moderator for today's session on mainstreaming, accessibility and inclusion in tourism with Planet-Abled and Neha Arora. Whether you are a loyal returner or joining us for the first time, it's a pleasure to have you here for this very brief format, our lunch format. I hope you have your lunch ready, and I'm very excited to directly dive into the session. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, just a very, very brief overview. On the slide here, you can see our members. The Roundtable is a multi-stakeholder initiative committed to enhancing human rights within the tourism industry. And today's discussion aligns with our goals to foster a more inclusive environment for all tourism stakeholders. We currently have more than 40 members from 7 countries with a lot of different stakeholders in 5 groups. Just be aware that our membership is actually open to all tourism stakeholders. If you are interested, then please feel free to drop us an email. And we would love to be part of your journey towards more human rights due diligence within the tourism industry. So feel free to reach out. Check also all the offers that we currently have on our website. And don't lose any time. I'd like to warmly welcome Neha Arora. She's actually not a stranger to us. We had the great pleasure to already have her as a panelist during this year's ITB. If you missed that panel, no worries, it is available on YouTube. It was titled From Diversity to Inclusion, Integrating Marginalized Groups in Tourism. So make sure to check that out. And just a very brief introduction, Neha is founder of Planet-Abled, which is a globally recognized and awarded travel brand promoting inclusive travel. Over the years, Planet-Abled has been a service provider for people with disabilities and a destination consultant. They have offices in India and Austria, and it's their mission to integrate accessibility and inclusion. I can't name all the awards that Neha has been selected for and all the conferences she's been speaking, but I'm sure a lot of you know her as she's an outstanding figure of accessible tourism and a female leader in the tourism industry. So without any further ado, Neha, I would like to give the floor to you, and we're very much looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much, Katharina, for such a kind and wonderful introduction. And I'm glad to be here. And thank you, everyone who has taken the time today for this session. I am just going to share my screen so that you can have the presentation. And just so you guys know, if anyone has any language issues, if your Zoom has a feature, you can turn on the captions, the auto-generated captions, just one of the accessibility features. And I am what do you call it? British Asian woman with short hair wearing black dress and presenting it to you for people who cannot see me. This is just one of the other accessibility feature which you should make as a practice during your presentations and sessions. And yeah, let's talk about mainstreaming accessibility and inclusion into the tourism industry. So Planet-Abled is a service provider, destination consultant, and an ecosystem builder for the tourism industry. We help mainstream accessibility into tourism frameworks, practices, and workforce so that everyone does it and takes advantage of this huge business opportunity. Wait, changing on my slide. So how we started and what the evolution of Planetable has been over the years. We started off as a travel design and service provider, creating holidays and recreational experiences for people with all types of disabilities, mixing people with various disabilities and non-disabled to travel together as well. But as the need because the industry was not ready, we became a destination developer and a consultant to the industry in terms of training the staff, auditing destinations, seeing what is accessible and making it accessible either temporarily or permanently. Sensitization and training of the workforce, whether it's the staff, the drivers, the guides, in terms of how inclusive products, experiences, and services can be created across the spectrum of disabilities. And of course, consulting other businesses, whether they are a destination, hotel chain, museum, homestay, or any other travel company to become accessible. We also are trying to standardize the whole ecosystem in the sense, what are the best practices that anyone and everyone can adopt, which we will be soon open sourcing for everyone. So you can just go and see what all you need to do, whether you are in a developed country or in an emerging country. It's a harmonized standard where you can just adopt those best practices and implement in your frameworks. And of course, if you need help, we are there to help you. And of course, then ending it with a one-stop platform where traveling and designing or planning and booking a trip for a disabled traveler is as easy as a non-disabled person. Why I do what I do is because of this picture. These are my parents. Both of them have disabilities. So my mother is a wheelchair user and my father is blind and also is a hearing aid user for past 10 years, along with cognitive decline due to age. And I have a handful of invisible disabilities myself. So my brain is kind of wired in a way that if someone asks, what is accessible? Which destination is most accessible? I will come back to you with a question. Accessible to whom? That is the question. Like whether it's accessible for a blind person, or it's accessible for a deaf person, or it's accessible for a wheelchair user, or it's accessible and inclusive for a person with autism or cognitive disability and the likes. Just briefing it here as well. Nearly 15 to 20% of the world population has a disability, which is over 1.3 billion people. And we have over 1 billion people over the age of 60 who have accessibility needs. And also looking at how disabilities are perceived. Like I am assuming, or I could be presuming that when it comes to accessibility, the first picture that comes to your mind is of a wheelchair, which is also the international sign for disability. But not all disabilities are in a wheelchair, or not all disabilities are even visible. So you might see a blind person or a person with any sensory disability with a guide dog or a service animal with a hearing aid, or they are using any other assistive devices. But a lot of times, disabilities are not visible. They are invisible to the eye. And if we can put into them groups, it's like mobility impairments, visual, hearing, neurodiversity, cognitive, psychosocial, and so many more. So let's look at the business opportunity of inclusive travel. We already talked about the number of people who have disabilities, right? And they are also one of the most loyal customers and spend more than 30, like almost 30% more money than a non-disabled traveler. They are loyal, one, because if they like a place, they will revisit that again. And also the internal referral mechanism into the disabled community is very strong. So your customer acquisition cost goes down pretty low. And when we look at the tourism and the hospitality industry as a whole. We have over 100,000 museums, 15 million food establishments, over 16 million hotel rooms, like spread across 700,000 hotels. And if you look at the accessibility of them, it's less than 5%. And not to miss out on the innumerable of open spaces, public parks and markets and stuff. And when we talk about going online, a large part of these transactions are done online or through a mobile app. And there are over 200,000 travel agencies designing these travel. But how many of them are really competent and capable enough to design holidays for travelers with all types of disabilities? So it's a huge wide gap that exists in the industry. And this segment holds $13 trillion of annual disposable income. So if we are not tapping into this market, we are really missing out on this opportunity. Why this gap exists, look at there is lack of awareness and training. Of course, there are stigmas and stereotypes that exist. And of course, the biggest is that the disabled community is not seen as a well-paying customer. And if any of these businesses have invested in the past, they haven't had a proper market outreach to the consumer in an optimum manner in terms of impact metrics on what was their ROI on that investment hasn't been focused upon yet. So they have really fallen through the crevices despite doing the work that they needed to do. This is an assessment, a high-performance assessment we did while we talked about the standardization. So as a starting point for building those global standards for accessibility, we did our stakeholder consultation at United Nations Vienna last year. And if you look here, the green dots show the tourism industry and the purple dots show the disabled community from developed countries and emerging countries of all types of disabilities. And the biggest finding here is that what the industry is perceiving to be accessible, that we are meeting all the compliances, we are doing as everything that is required by the law, but what the expectation of a disabled traveler is not being met. So there is a huge wide gap that exists, what industry perceives to be accessible and what are the expectations of disabled travelers, like what is accessible to me and what would make a great memorable holiday for me and my family or my friends. So what does an accessible experience look like in any destination or type of establishment for that matter? The most important is train and sensitize staff. I mean, we are today talking about pillow menus in hotels. Can't we have an accessibility menu? Like, what is the accessibility need? And if the staff is trained on catering to the needs of disabled travelers. Imagine having an internal accessibility manager whose 50% or 100% of the job is to drive accessibility and inclusion internally. Then it's very cost effective. Plus, it actually helps you keep your ever-changing workforce also trained always into accessibility and inclusion. So at every touch point across an establishment, the staff knows how to communicate or serve a guest with disability. Of course, now talking about accessible communication, like how about communicating with a deaf person if they're staying at a hotel, or how about the storytelling by guides to hard of hearing guests or or visitors who have dementia or who are on the autism spectrum. So what are the different mechanisms of communicating with various types of disabilities? That training and earmarking of those solutions has to be there. Assistive technology integration. So today, when we think of if I talk about accessibility for the blind, the first thing that comes to your mind is Braille. But you know what? The education of Braille, even in people who are blind, is less than 10%. Everyone has moved on to technology solutions everywhere. So how you can integrate technology solutions into your establishment, your products and services, and your destinations, so that a blind or a visually impaired guest can actually navigate the destination independently and have an inclusive travel experience. Some examples could be indoor navigation technologies, or having digital menus at your restaurants, or having 3D printed models at your museums, for that matter. Now, let's come to the information aspect of it. Like, is your information available in accessible formats, for that matter? Is your website accessible? Is your software application accessible? Do you have content or fancy storytelling that you do at your destination into simple language formats, or in digital formats, so that people with learning disabilities or people with print disability can also access your information in as equitably as any non-disabled traveler? And of course, the biggest aspect is human aspect of accessibility. Like a hotel or a museum or a destination could be very good in terms of physical built environment accessibility. But if the people in there are not empathetic or willing to go out of the way to make an experience or visit of a disabled traveler inclusive and equitable, then the whole built environment accessibility fails. So the human aspect cannot be missed out when we are talking about tourism and hospitality, especially. So all of this that we talked about to make it make a travel experience accessible and inclusive is not limited to when a traveler is actually visiting a destination. The first part of the journey starts when a disabled traveler thinks, I think I should travel. And then they go online. Do they find accessible travel content that it can access to make a very informed decision about where they will be going? And do they find the accessible booking platforms which can ease that purchase, for that matter? So identifying a destination, making an informed decision about the destination, and making the purchase. This pre-travel process of the journey should be accessible and inclusive too, for all types of disability. This includes your website, your communication, your information, and how readily the data about accessibility is really available online, or in your communication or information brochures that you are sharing with the world, or your social media platforms. Like, you're creating fancy travel videos all the time. Does it have audio description or captions for people with disabilities to access it? The second part of the journey is experience and feedback. So while a traveler is on the trip, are their needs being taken care of while designing their travel? And during all touch points of their travel, has this been communicated to all the stakeholders in the ecosystem? And the whole travel is designed accordingly. And all the providers, like it could be anyone for that matter, the guides, the transport providers, the hotel staff, and people a disabled traveler comes in contact with during the travel. And once they are back from their holiday, is there a feedback loop? What went wrong and what went right? What was good? What was not so good? And there is a constant improving mechanism around it too. This is important, actually very, very important in terms of what language to use, not just the verbal language, but also your body language. So always use people first or identity first language. The people first language is person with disability or people with disabilities, and identity first language is disabled people or disabled person. Please stop, avoid using euphemisms like differently able, people with special needs, or specially abled, or people with determination, or Divyang, wherever you are in the world. A lot of countries have their own euphemisms allocated, but this is a UN suggested language to use by the people first or identity first language. But even if I say so, at the end, the decision of what a disabled person wants to be called, that decision lies with the disabled person, what they want to be called. If they are more comfortable being called a differently able person, sure, we use that. But then a non-disabled person should not be deciding what they are being called. And of course, disability is not a bad word, so we have to stop looking at it that way. It's just a word. And in terms of your body language, just giving an example, you might offer you to shake your hand with a blind person, but they might not offer their hand to you because they cannot see your hand. So a lot of our communication in person happens through our sight. So always be mindful that a blind person cannot see that. Or in terms of a wheelchair user or a deaf person, if you're talking to them, look at them. Do not either ask their caregiver or look at their interpreter while you're communicating with them. So just few of the examples that you should look at while in terms of your body language while communicating with a disabled person. So what does an ideal version of inclusive travel looks like? More than compliance or any laws, it has to be customer-centric in the first place, because it has to come from a place of an intention. Yes, I want to cater to a traveler with disability because it makes right sense, because I might be impacted by it at some point in my life, and you will be impacted by it at some point. And based on real-time data, because sometimes information about accessibility of a destination might change. So always keep yourself updated on that while you are designing or catering to a visitor with disability, because you don't want to be surprised in a negative way if someone visits you or your customer visits you. The pricing always has to be equitable. Yes, we are talking about disability tax in all aspects, because everything is expensive for a disabled traveler. Yes, even traveling with a disability is expensive. So we have to look at how we can offer equitable pricing and also create an industry where economies of scales come in and traveling with a disability becomes more and more affordable because everyone is doing it. So we have to look at it as a collaborative measure from the industry side, because of course, why someone should be devoid of exploring this wonderful world just because they happen to have a disability. Yeah, so the whole travel experience, right from the starting point of planning, should be seamless, adapted to the needs of traveler, and should offer a qualitative experience tailored to their needs, accessibility needs. Why is a big opportunity for hospitality businesses? We have more and more elderly travelers who were avid travelers. If you remember the travelers of the 60s and 70s who travel by road all over the world, and who are now wanting to travel again in their old age or when they have acquired a disability. There are multi-generational families who want to travel, and they could be a child with disability or elderly grandparents in that. And the whole concept of responsible and sustainable tourism that we are having all over the world, accessibility has to be a part of it. It is a part of it. And there is a large spectrum of disabilities that are being recognized globally, depending upon where you are in the world. But do not limit yourself to those recognized disabilities as well, because there are hundreds and thousands of disabilities and conditions that exist. Especially after after COVID, we have long COVID, a lot of people who have gone through amputations, and a lot of people who have acquired disability after that. And like I mentioned, the whole large spectrum earlier of disabilities is huge. And we have more and more people who are living with visible or invisible disabilities. And mapping the SDGs, inclusive tourism hits upon 6 sustainable development goals. So if you are looking at as an organization on meeting the SDGs, you cannot ignore accessible tourism as being a part of it. Where can you start as an organization? First, evaluate where you are in your journey at the moment. You might be already doing a lot of things right without even realizing. So evaluate where you are, build a roadmap for next couple of years at least, because it's not a project that, okay, we get it done in the next 2-3 months and we are accessible and inclusive and we are done. No, it is a journey that you are taking it for a lifetime, and you will keep on evolving, keep on learning. And for that, you need a roadmap that where you will reach a point where you can say, yes, we are accessible and we are on a journey and we'll keep on evolving. Allocate the resources, whether it's human or financial resources, into your budget, and see at what point in time what resources would be invested into your journey. And you need to have a holistic plan across accessibility. Please don't say we'll do it for wheelchair users first, then we'll think about blind people, then you can think about deaf people, but we are not thinking as a holistic measure, because there is also a lot of intersectionality about in accessibility too. Like an accessibility feature that works for the blind might work for a person in a wheelchair too. So it's good to have a holistic plan. Of course, you can implement it in a staggered approach. Okay, we start with these solutions first for these disabilities and then go forward with that. But you have to have a holistic plan in place during building your roadmap. How can we help you? It's about choosing the right partner who can help you implement accessibility in your evaluation and resource allocation, building your policy and roadmap, auditing your destinations, and consulting you and helping you build your inclusive products and services, and or as a destination, how you can like work with your stakeholders to implement accessibility in your destination. Training, implementation, and of course, certification. This applies to creating internal accessibility leaders in your organization, and then building an certified accessible destination, or a hotel or a museum for that matter, and reaching out to the market, because of course the return of investment of your initial resources, the time, effort, and money you have implemented into it, it has to be monitored through proper impact metrics and reaching out to the market to get an ROI. These are just few of the pictures of what an inclusive travel experience can look like. Here you see a blind person, a family with a person in a wheelchair, and on the right, a lady who has dementia traveling. Here you have an inclusive travel group with various disabilities from various ethnicities traveling, a multi-generational family who's traveling across the world, and children having invisible disabilities, or deaf travelers, for that matter, communicating in sign language. Again, a deaf traveler, a person with Down syndrome, and a wheelchair user on a holiday. Here you have a blind couple, a family who is traveling with mental health issues and cognitive disabilities, and a family wherein one couple one of the partners has an amputation. Happy to answer any questions you have. Yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Neha. I think that was an absolutely pitch perfect presentation, especially when you're talking about all these facts and figures. That makes it so obvious that we definitely have a business opportunity here. It's not only about doing good, but it is a huge market, as you mentioned. I highly encourage our participants to ask their questions via the chat if they have any. And in the meantime, I'll just start with something easy to get you into the questionnaire mode. Do you have a good practice example for, I don't know, either a website that you particularly like for its accessibility and inclusion that you like to share? Like anything that comes to your mind where you see, okay, they did a really, really good job in making their whole appearance online, for example, accessible to the various needs.
I find Expedia, because it might not be visible to the eye while you are visiting Expedia, it's accessible, but that's the only OTA website that is accessible digitally. So, and accessible, like a website doesn't need to look bad if it's accessible. It can be a nice website and can be accessible too. So I find Expedia to be a really good example at that.
Okay, and of course, there's no advertisement, but we'll just wanted to have a good.
I'm not being paid by them, not promoting them, but it's just a good example that they
exactly
have created.
That's what I'm saying. And sometimes you need to point out something that is doing, or somebody that is doing a good job. You were talking also about the resources, and I can imagine, I mean, it is pretty tough to get started because, as you also said, I mean, the field is really, really huge. So it can seem a little overwhelming to get started. And you mentioned the resources. We also have a resource center on our website, and we definitely working on including more resources on that topic. But if there's something that pops to your mind or any other source where people can find guidance on how to get started, is there anything that comes to your mind?
Like we are building that, but it's unfortunate that there is a lack of information about, in terms of resources as well. So the UN website has a few resources which you can look at. If you just type accessible tourism at the UNWTO, they have some basic guidelines, documents which are there, which you can follow to build some frameworks. Yeah, and they are good starting documents. And I find Visit Scotland also has some resources. Even Visit Britain, I think they're the only one who are even tracking good data around travelers with disabilities. So I did not mention, like, in terms of the money that is being spent by travelers with disabilities, because very few, like less data is available. I mean, there is data from US, which is about only wheelchair users. And I think in 2019, they spent $58 billion on travel. Only wheelchair users is the number we're talking about, and which is like 10% of the disabled population. The rest of the people, the 90%, are not wheelchair users. So you look at, like, you know, how much are we really missing out on the opportunity? But yeah, these are a few of the resources and good examples you can look at. And we really need one place where all of these resources are there and consolidated, so that as much as it is needed for travel planning and booking for a disabled traveler, it is equally important. It is simple and accessible for the industry to have access to the resources that can help them become accessible in a easy way. Don't get overwhelmed. It's really not that difficult, trust me. You can start where you are.
We were already having a lot of questions popping up in the chat, which is fantastic because it doesn't always happen, but it seems to be very obvious that people have a huge need for answers. So I'll just start with the first one, which is your presented results of the stakeholder consultation show perfectly the central problem. The gap between customer requirements and the self-image of providers. If providers do not open up to sharing experiences and accepting specialized know-how on accessibility, nothing will change. Do you believe that significant improvements can be achieved if tourism managers rely on voluntary measures?
Yes, I would say more than legal compliance. If the industry takes it as an opportunity, capitalism drives the world. I mean, and if the industry people, like, the tourism stakeholders say, okay, we want to do it because it makes good business sense and it makes good, impactful social sense, they can lead the conversations. Why not? Rather, they can even then influence the governments to implement accessibility. We have laws in place more or less in a lot of countries, except like the the disturbed ones, but then the implementation is the challenge. I mean, US ADA, the Americans with Disability Law, has been around for 34 years, but still people have unfortunate travel experiences with disabilities traveling. So until and unless the industry comes forward and says intentionally we want to do it, focusing on the customer instead of just doing it for legal compliance, that is where that is game changing.
Absolutely. And I also really liked another comment that we had in the chat saying that I believe the industry could also make jobs more accessible and help to change perceptions. I have never been checked in by a front officer staff in a wheelchair, for example. I think that is absolutely right. We need more visibility for all people with disabilities, because I think, Neha, we already had that during our panel at ITB. You need to at least know what is out there, and your mind will change completely if you once had that interaction with somebody and then have an eye for it.
Oh, absolutely. And these people, like when you have an inclusive workforce, like I was talking about internal accessibility managers in your organization, that is where they will lead the cause themselves. They have to be persons with disabilities, because then you will see it on a daily basis, what their life is like. Then you won't see it as a us versus them. Then you'll see as we are all us, and some of them happen to have a disability and their needs are to be met as visitors and as workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another question and comment here. Inclusive travel often are more difficult to find than sustainable travel offers as a whole. Do you know whether some countries already have a database of accessible hotel accommodations and activities, for example, or whether someone has started to collect them on a commercial basis?
So the thing is, what is accessible again? What is an accessible hotel room? So the unfortunate part is when we talk about an accessible hotel room, we are almost always talking about wheelchair accessible hotel rooms, because that is what exists. I think except US or in some other countries, I haven't seen anything which are like by design included into travelers with other types of disabilities. And there are a couple of commercial websites that do booking for wheelchair users only. And like there are a couple of websites like that, but then they are again US focused or Europe focused. In other parts of the world, you don't find that. So for US, I think there's a website called Accessible Go. Then there is in Australia, there is one Accessible Accommodation, but then they are only wheelchair user focused. So you are again looking at only 10%, less than 10% of the disabled population for accessible accommodations. Unfortunately, for the rest, nothing exists. And that's the sad part of it. In our 10-year plan, we have that. So we are working on creating more and more, because first we have to create these places or accommodations which are accessible for all. Like then we can only list them, So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely a big journey. I think we all know that. And we also see that in all the comments popping up in the chat. People with disability need to be more visible. It needs to be considered as a human right, also the right to travel for people with disabilities. I think we can underline everything here.
Yes.
And I mean, especially after everything that you said, we might have a few people in the audience who think, okay, this is a lot. And maybe do you have like one simple hack one thing that you can do, that you can directly implement without needing the whole holistic strategy that is, of course, necessary, but something that makes probably a change in your day-to-day life that you can already implement today?
Well, one, I wish the answer was that simple. But I think one thing you can do, depending upon what kind of a business you are or organization you are, and whatever you're doing in your daily life, whether it's products, services, or you are an establishment, look at whom you are excluding. Do a self-check. What kind of people am I excluding? And then include them. I mean, like, you know, look at all the diverse human forms that exist. Like, there is a lot of more awareness about LGBTQ plus travelers than disabled travelers, of course. And that's a big market opportunity. But do you know the intersectionality between LGBTQ plus and disabled travelers is 30%? So if you are looking at LGBTQ plus, you are missing out on 30% of them because you're not accessible for disabled travelers. So it's good to first say, whom are you excluding? And be open to the idea that we want to be inclusive. And if any inquiry comes to you, be open to learning from them. At least a disabled person would be able to tell you their own lived experience accessibility, what works for them. It might not work for, like what works for one wheelchair user might not work for the other wheelchair user, but for them it will work. So that's a good point to start if you really want to. And put it on your website and all of your social media channels that you are open to welcoming guests with disabilities, because a group that has been historically ignored will assume you are inaccessible if you do not go and tell them consciously. And start by writing alt text on your on the pictures of your social media post, on your pictures, and like captions on the videos that you put, and whatever travel content you're creating to promote yourself as a tourism organization. Like, see if there is representation of all types of people.
Yeah, these are already a few tips that we can definitely implement. We also, as a Roundtable, definitely learned something before even starting this webinar, and how to use the captions within the Zoom function. Technology also, of course, makes a lot of things easier for us, as you mentioned, Neha. I wish we had more time because, yeah, interest is high, and I definitely hope that we can embark on this journey together. You already mentioned that you are also happy to receive questions. People can contact you. So I would ask Yara, my colleague in the background, to post the website again, Planet Abled, and Neha's email address. We're almost out of time. Neha, it was absolutely fantastic to have you with us. As I said, I mean, much to learn, but it's such an interesting field. As you said, it's something that all of us might be in contact with at one or another point in our lives, with our families, with our friends, with ourselves. So nothing that we can ignore. And definitely important for all of us to keep attendance high for this topic. And also thank you for the wonderful work that you are doing. I think it's highly impressive. I would sincerely like all of you to thank all of you for being so active in the chat, for all of your statements. We'll definitely take some time to read through them as well after our discussion today. Make sure to register to our newsletter to not miss one of the other webinars that we have, and also the events that we're having. And I think that's it. Neha, any last words? Then I would like you to close the webinar.
Yes, it was a great session today. Thank you for asking so many questions. And I think just keep in mind that disabled people is a minority that any one of us can join anytime. So you will be impacted by it, whether temporarily or permanently in some form or the other. We are just one accident, one medical condition, one new birth, old age away from being disabled. So why not build a world, or why not build a tourism industry which is ready and inclusive to welcome travelers with all types of accessibility needs, instead of thinking it at a day in the future when we are not ready. So it's all of us who have to come together as a collaborative effort to make it happen. I want to do this in my lifetime, like mainstream accessibility into tourism industry, and I need all of your help to do that. So let's make it happen together.
Perfect, perfect final speech. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. See you next time, and let's stay in touch. If you are a tour operator or another state tourism stakeholder, also think about a membership with us. Get in touch with Neha, and we sincerely looking forward to see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.